o'clock, and we have a pretty full schedule this afternoon. So I know people probably continue to come in here for a little bit, but let's go ahead and call the meeting to order so we can get started. Kayla, could you please do roll call for us? Or do you need just a minute since you're still admitting people? I forget that you have to admit every person this year.
No, that's okay. I can get started on roll call. Just so you know, we also have Jordan Christian helping from KSDE, and he will have roll call for SICC as well.
Yes, thank you for the reminder.
All right, Jennifer King.
Here.
Keith Piney.
Here.
Amy Wagoner. Barney let me know that he will not be on. Becky Werner. Brandon Gay.
I'm here. This is Becky Warner. I just couldn't get unmuted. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Brandon Gay. Okay, Jennifer Kaczynski. Jennifer Kurth.
I'm here.
Carrie Wallace.
I'm here.
Laura Thompson. Lena Kistner. Marvin Miller. Matthew Ramsey.
Here.
Michelle Warner.
Here.
Paul Buck.
I'm present.
Rebecca Schultz.
Present.
Sabrina Rischel.
I'm here.
Tobias Wood.
Tobias is here.
Trisha Backman.
I'm here.
Dr. Troy Pish. Whitney George.
I'm here.
Mike Burgess. Jim McNeese. Is Leslie Gerard or Leah Hawley on?
I'm here, and you can take Leah off of that
Okay.
list. I think she was just a presenter once, but yeah, I'm here.
Mike Burgess. Rocky Nichols. And Ashley Inns. And for our KSDE staff, Bert Moore.
Present.
Is Shanna Bigler on? Brian Dempsey. Julie Rand. Carrie Haig. Okay, and that is all that I have. Did I miss anybody in roll call?
Laura Lystra. Yeah, this is Laura Lystra with KDHE.
Okay. Anybody else in this in roll call?
Yeah, this is Brandon Gay. I think I must have missed my name, but I'm here.
All right, thank you, Brandon.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, if nobody else, I'll turn it over to Jordan, and he could finish his.
Thanks, Kayla. And Dave, I have everyone written down here, so I can go ahead and run through the list for you. That'll be a little easier than you having to search through who's attending. So I'm going to mention your name, and if you wouldn't mind just briefly mentioning your role on the state ICC as well when I do so. Laura, I know you just went. Would you mind introducing yourself again real quick? Laura Lystra.
Absolutely. I'm with KDHE in the Medicaid Department of Healthcare Finance, and I'm the Medicaid representative for the council.
Thank you, Laura. Melinda Klein.
Thank you, Jordan. I'm here. I'm Melinda Klein, and I'm Deputy Director of Permanency and a council member for SICC.
Thank you, Melinda. Dr. Dave Lindeman.
Yes, I'm Dave Lindeman, and I'm the Regents representative to the council.
Lori Schmidt.
I'm a parent member.
Thank you, Lori. Ann Elliott.
Man Elliott, I'm the executor at the Family Resource Center, and I'm a provider member, sorry.
Thanks, Ann. Nichelle or Nikki.
I'm Nichelle Adams, and I'm the Department for Children and Families Child Care representative.
Thank you, Nichelle. Debbie Deere.
Hello, I am Debbie Deere, and I work with the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund, and I am their representative on the State ICC Council.
Thank you, Debbie. Tricia Wagner.
My name is Tricia Wagner, and I work for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and I'm the Part C coordinator for the state of Kansas.
Thank you, Tricia. Lisa Collette.
Hi, I'm Lisa Collette, and I represent the Kansas Insurance Department, and I also I'm the Family Engagement Coordinator for the Deafblind Project.
Thank you, Lisa. Laura Smith Everett.
Hello, I'm a parent representative.
Thank you, Laura. Susan Bowles.
Hi, I'm Susan Bowles, and I'm a speech language pathologist, and I am a provider member.
Thank you, Susan. Julie Rand.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Julie Rand. I work for the Kansas State Department of Education, and I am the Part B coordinator.
Thank you, Julie. Liz Brunsheen.
I'm Liz Brunsheen, and I am a parent representative.
Thank you, Liz. And then one of our current pending members, I saw her hop on, Erin Schuweiler.
Hi, I'm Erin Schuweiler. I work at the Kansas School for the Deaf in the Sound Start Early Intervention Program and the Language Assessment Program. And I think eventually I get to be a provider member.
Thank you, Erin. Leslie Gerard, I know you're one of our ex officio members, but.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Leslie Gerard with Families Together, and I represent the Parent Training and Information Center and families across Kansas.
Thank you, Leslie. Were there any other state ICC members that might have hopped on that I missed?
Hi, Jordan. This is Brenda Soto. I'm with DCF, and I'm the Medicaid and Children's Mental Health Director.
Thank you, Brenda. All right, with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Kayla.
All right, and then Jennifer King.
So our next order of business is to review the agenda for today, and after everyone's had time to look over that, either point out any corrections or and make a nomination for approval.
I nominate to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
This is Tobias. I have I'll second that.
Okay, that was really fast. I know more that Marvin did email a correction to be made. So since we're approving, there were no other corrections, correct? Just want to make sure.
Those were corrections on the minutes, not the agenda.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. A lot of meetings today. All right. Thank you. So then,
Jennifer, are we approving just today's agenda or today and tomorrow?
there are two different agendas, so just today's.
Okay, just making sure.
Good question. Thanks.
Okay, and looks like majority voted to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Taylor. So motion passes, and we'll move on to review of the minutes, and there are a couple of suggestions for edits there. So you guys want to take turns? Tobias, do you want to start with yours since you mentioned it in chat?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. On page 9, under the section that I presented last time, the second bullet, where it says doesn't need a comfort aid, that should read doesn't need accommodations to get a comfort aid. Not a big deal, but it's an important piece of it.
I will get that changed.
Thank you.
Marvin, you emailed about one yesterday. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, there was some, I think it was on page 9, I don't have it in front of me. It said something about the state has something about 21 credits, or the district has about, it should be above 21 credits, I believe. If someone wants to read that line for me, I don't have that in front of me. Yeah, it's a line that says page 9, second bullet point, the fourth sub 1, local districts have control about 21 credits. They have control above 21 credits, I believe. And then I move to go ahead and accept the minutes with corrections.
This is Tobias. I'll second those.
All right, thank you. And then we'll take a vote here quickly.
Ms. Chairman, may I make a comment real quick?
Absolutely.
Hey, I just want to thank, I believe it's Kayla Love or Jordan or that team there. This had a lot of details and a lot of stuff on the minutes. They did a really good job capturing it all. So just wanted to express my thanks.
And thank you, Marvin. And I believe that majority has voted to approve the minutes with those changes added.
Excellent. Okay, so motion passes, and we will move into public comment next. Do we have anyone either on the line or any written public comment? Oh, apparently we do. No, I'm sorry.
I have not received any.
Sorry, I said these are the guidelines. I don't feel like, I don't know, for some reason I don't remember them usually popping up here. So you're very thorough, Kayla. Good job. It's just, okay, so we don't have any public comment. And Bert, we don't have to wait then since we're not in person, correct? Since everything has to be submitted in advance.
That's correct.
Just making sure nothing has changed. All right, then. Then the next thing that we have is we have Dr. Eva Horn presenting on pre-service programs and lack of student teachers in early childhood. If you are here, I know we're running a little ahead of time, so.
This is Dave Lindeman. I think I saw Eva on the participant list, but I wanted just to take a minute to introduce Eva. For those who know Eva, for probably 10 years after she moved to Kansas, she always said, I'm new to Kansas. And I just saw the other day that she'd been here for over 22 years now. So if she gives that excuse, please try to kind of ignore her a bit because she's been around for a while now. So Eva's one of our esteemed colleagues at the University of Kansas. She's the director or coordinator for the Early Childhood Unified Teacher Training Program, well respected across the nation as an educator, researcher, has been involved in many things at the national level. And we've asked her specifically to come and talk to us about kind of the status of our early childhood programs at the University of Kansas, but also I'm hoping that she'll fill in a little bit for what she knows around the state and nation. Eva. I think you're on mute, Eva.
Okay. Am I heard now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry, clicked the wrong thing. So again, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Is it possible for me to share, of course, you know, I'm a faculty member. I have a very brief PowerPoint to try to keep myself more organized in some ways. Is it possible for me to share my screen?
Of course.
Great. Yeah, I see the button down there. So let's see if this works. Okay. So I'll give it a try from the current. So can folks see that PowerPoint? So real quick, just responding to Dave's because I can't. I have not been in Kansas for 22 years. I have been in Kansas for 21 years. So, you know, still somewhat new, right? No, seriously, I consider myself a Kansan very much so at this point in time. And when I was asked to do this last week, I kept thinking that how do I approach this? It is absolutely a critical issue that's going on. But the reality is, it's not just early childhood. So I'm going to try to sort of give us just with these quick 3 PowerPoint slides that I have, just get us all on the same page in terms of, and so basically talking about this whole notion of educator shortages or teacher shortages, a basic 101. So that, and many of us, and I know that in many ways I'm speaking to the choir in terms of these 2 councils around this issue, but I think it's really important for us to really think about this notion of teacher shortages and what does it really mean? Are we all using the same language, which I don't think that always the general public really fully understands. And that is, so I put a quick definition of what do we mean by teacher shortages? And it basically means we just don't have enough teachers, particularly in key subject areas. And you can see on the graph that I added there that it comes from a study that was done. You can see the citation there. I won't try to pronounce all those names. But basically, they were doing a projection of what we were looking at in terms of teacher shortages. This article was published in 2015. The data actually represents the projections, if you will, were actually based on data from 2014. Yeah, well before the pandemic. So my guess is that these being recalculated would look even worse in terms of, we've often in the field of education talked about, and this is all educators, we've talked about this cliff that's coming in terms of more retirements, less people coming into the field, less ability to retain teachers in this field, in the field of education. The other thing I think that's really important to note is that when we talk about key areas, special education has always been one of those key areas. So if the graph only displayed shortages in special education, we would even look worse than what's looking, you know, the limited supply. Even if we're just looking at shortages across all of education, the other thing that really impacts this these projections is that it's even larger when we're making sure that teachers are fully credentialed. In other words, some of our problem is that, you know, we're not able to fill the positions with fully qualified folks. And again, in special education, it is even more the problem. So once again, I know I'm speaking to the choir, but I think, you know, really having that understanding is really so important. So the next slide that I have is, so why? Why are we experiencing these teacher shortages? And again, I think that all of us totally get this, but I think it's really important that we continue to think about it's not just getting more bodies in. The problem is, as you know, the top reasons, again, fully qualified applicants, school districts are not finding those folks. So yes, I know in the Lawrence Journal World today, you know, there was the discussion of we're going to change the requirements for substitute teachers. We're going to lower the requirements. Again, in special education, we have been battling this for so long. It's not we've got to do something besides lowering the requirements. Salary and benefits are lacking compared to other careers. Most of our educators, all of our educators have bachelor's degrees. They all have, you know, are licensed folks if they're fully qualified. Many of our special education folks, and this includes early childhood special educators, have master's degrees, and yet when we compare them to other careers, so again, we all know the issues around all teachers. There's also the issue of high stress, high expectations with minimal respect. And then really the final one on here is the one that you all asked me to talk about, or that I was invited to talk about, is the issue of fewer education school graduates. The numbers of students coming into, or the number of prospective educators across all areas, is declining rapidly and has been even before the pandemic. The pandemic has just, in many ways, brought to light this big issue. And I know I sound really like Debbie Downer, negative around this, but it is scary in terms of what we're looking at in terms of the shortages. And this quote at the bottom, who would want to be a teacher right now? Have you seen how they're being treated? Was actually a quote from the Secretary of Education from the state of Michigan. And, you know, I think we need to take that to heart, both as educators ourselves or involved in the field of education, but also as public citizens, to say, you know, we need to advocate for a broader understanding by the public of the issues that are happening for teachers and why we're losing teachers. And again, I think for those of us in the field of supporting the full age continuum of children and families who are experiencing developmental delays or disabilities, it's even more important that we're out there advocating for that this is an important field, it's a meaningful career, and that we respect the folks that are out there doing it. So it does become our responsibility as well. So those are my soapboxes, but you asked me to talk about early childhood educators in particular, and the early childhood educator program in particular. And I just, you know, with this cartoon, I was trying to just emphasize that I really do believe that in the field of early childhood education, these issues of teacher shortages and the reasons that people are not going into the field are just multiplied multiple times. The problem is that the issues around salary, the issues of lack of respect are 3 times as impactful in the field of early childhood education. Many of our early childhood educators that are working with the children under the age of 5 are making, and hopefully you've heard this argument. If not, please listen to this notion that those early childhood educators working with children from birth to 5 years of age in education and care settings are making less than the person that's working at Target, is making less than the person at McDonald's. They are not making a living wage. In fact, many of the children in one of our federal programs that supports early childhood children in high-risk situations, the Head Start program, the teachers that are in those Head Start programs are actually, in many cases, qualify for Head Start programs for their children because they are not making the kind of income that would, or they are making the kind of income that makes them eligible for Head Start services. So, the very people that we have working in the field are actually the people that are at economic risk, and we're asking those folks to provide this high quality early education experiences to support children to not continue in that loop. So hopefully I've depressed everybody enough that we've got to do something. The reality is, as we look here in Kansas, we're no different than the rest of the nation in terms of this issue of teacher shortages in key areas, and definitely shortages of individuals that are currently in early childhood education, early childhood special education, and early intervention. But importantly also, as is much of the rest of the nation, we are seeing huge drops in the numbers of students that are entering or deciding to come into our programs of educator preparation for the early childhood. Kansas having the Early Childhood Unified Program, which is the blending of both early childhood education and early childhood special education for the birth through grade 3 age range. For KU, for example, we routinely at our undergraduate program had 20 to 25 applicants coming in for a cohort, with us admitting 20, usually around 20 into the program. And then by the end of the 4-year program, being able to, in a cohort, so each year graduating around 18 students. And while that doesn't sound like huge numbers, they were solid numbers for us. And, there are other programs across the state putting folks out. This year, we admitted 8. We can't sustain our program with just 8 students. We're hoping that some of that has to do with the pandemic that has made this worse. But when I talk to my colleagues across the state, others are feeling this. And as I understand it, there are a couple of programs that have actually gone on, sort of temporarily closed, if you will, not taking new students. So, and yet at the same time, literally every week, I have gotten contacts from school districts across the state saying, do you have a graduate? Do you have someone that is almost finished with the program that we could go ahead and hire? We've got teachers currently out there in early childhood special education and early childhood in our pre-K classrooms in which many of our children with disabilities are served, where they are literally doubling up on kids because they don't have folks. We had 3 graduates out of our master's program this spring, in December. All 3 of them were hired on emergency waivers already starting last spring before they had finished our program. So the demand is there, and we're not able to get enough folks out. One other anecdote that I will share is that, and again, I know this is not just the early childhood. I know other areas of special education are experiencing this as well. But here at the University of Kansas for our master's program, which leads to that same license, but birth through kindergarten, we have a federal grant that provides tuition support to the roughly about $22,000 for them to apply towards the costs of getting the master's degree. It pretty much covers the cost of the master's degree. We had 14 slots that we could fill last fall. We were only able to, even telling people we were going to pay for your tuition costs through this federal grant, we were only able to enroll 10 students. I will say the good news is with the spring semester, we've been able to add an additional 4 students. So we do now have our slots filled for this year. But again, I think it just talks to you and provides you information about the problem. And it is a problem that goes beyond, well, let's just throw more money at it. It really is a problem of the entire field it's both the supply, but it's also, really working at trying to work at the conditions of the field of teaching, and particularly the field of teaching in early childhood special education, and early intervention. With that, I will stop. I feel a little bit like I've been on a soapbox in front of a group of people that I understand know this and live this every day, but I'll be happy to take questions, comments.
Eva, this is Dave. I've got a question. In your conversations with colleagues in state and across the nation, have people begun to develop strategies for recruitment into programs? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I would say, on a national level, there's a lot of interest around this issue at the national level, both in early childhood. I would say, at the national level, the real issue has been, particularly when we're talking about early childhood educators and which includes early care, child care, as well as early childhood special ed. The real focus has been on the professionalization of the field, and with a huge policy effort, and I know Kansas has been involved with that through the Children's Cabinet, really talking about this issue of we can't up the requirements for qualifications, education, preparation, etc., without truly taking on this big issue around compensation. And so there's lots of efforts going on at a policy and legislative effort around that. And there are lots of organizations that I think are really where there's lots of good information in terms of strategies that we as individuals and we as groups can do to promote that, including NAEYC, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, is a great resource to go to find out what you as an individual or groups of individuals can do. And then also at the national level, the Hunt Institute has lots of informational sessions and doing lots of work on advocating for that. At the local level, I would say, or at the state level, again, I think the work that's being done by the Children's Cabinet and the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel is an important place to look for that. In terms of, I know I'm going all over the place in terms of responding to your question, Dave. The other thing that I've seen efforts being done, and many of you know about this, is the work that's being done in what one would call grow your own. So where we're really looking at partnerships between school districts and universities in terms of recruitment into programs, so that the school districts with high school students really start connecting with opportunities for learning about what is a career in early childhood and what are the things that you can do, and connecting with the university. I know that there's a couple of schools in Kansas City, Kansas that we have partnerships with in the School of Education and Human Sciences here at KU, where the students actually come onto campus if they're interested in this career track of human services and education. They come on, and we as faculty do dog and pony shows in terms of why you would want to do our programs, as well as having other students. So doing some of those partnerships in terms of growing your own. Another strategy that has been used both nationally and definitely is happening here in Kansas is the idea, and this is not just in terms of early childhood, but certainly all areas of special education, is looking at folks who are working who may have a bachelor's degree and are working as paraprofessionals within school districts, linking them with university programs. I would say right now, over 60% of the students in our master's program have been or are working as paraprofessionals currently, and continue to work as paraprofessionals as they complete the licensure and then the master's degree, and then get hired by that school district to fill those positions. So that's just a few that I know of. So I'll stop again. I see something in the chat. I don't know if Whitney George put in a question. She says, my principal and I talked about this topic yesterday. I showed her the agenda. She mentioned it would be helpful to not have restricted requirements of license. For example, my license is only K6, but a kindergarten teacher might want to teach preschool, yet because of license. Again, there is always the option of, I think Whitney, I totally understand in this crisis situation that we need to be doing those kinds of short-term kinds of things, but I think we need to be careful around those short-term kinds of modifications, because it doesn't really get at the critical issue of the long-term shortages. And that's kind of what we've been doing for a while, is that, and so there are things in place. So you can get a provisional license if you already have a license, and that provisional license, though, would requires that you are in a program that leads to the full license. And so, your principal could hire someone who is a K-6 teacher for a preschool position, but then would need to work with a university to get that person into a program to complete the full license. So there are some of those things already in place. I see somebody, I don't know if I should call on folks, but I do see Tobias. Am I saying your name correctly? I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So I'm I work with the Kansas Board of Regents, and specifically I assist the community and technical colleges with some of their Perkins spending, which is a large federal grant. Now, early childhood development classes are a Perkins approved program in several of our institutions across the state. And I'm 90% certain that I think it's Barton Community College that has an agreement with Fort Hays State University where students can kind of fast track into that program. And that is something that that we might be able to maybe upscale that across the state. That's something that my office could assist community colleges if they were interested in working with a 4-year partner to make something like that happen.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point. And certainly we, coming into our program here at KU, we do have students that come from community college and move into the licensure program, come in as sophomores, juniors, transition into our program. But those, we used to talk about them as articulation programs. I think we really do need to think more broadly about how those work and doing those kinds of partnerships like Fort Hays has done. I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, well, something that could be done at the college level is to make those transitions more clean and easy for students transitioning into those programs. Also, if they had, like what Fort Hays and Barton have, just an agreement where they just make it a clean sweep. That if you're in this program, it's really easy to get into this college, into this university program. So those are some things that if we can kind of lean on the colleges a little bit to do that, and maybe lean on the 2-year sector to make those transitions easy.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think one of the issues that has to happen is that it's on both. It's on the university and it's on the 2-year colleges, and that there really is that they start talking to the talking to the students, as well as, if a student comes in wanting to do that movement, is that from the beginning that they are also talking with the university that they intend to move to complete the program, rather than it happening, oh, I've done my 2 years and now is this going to work? So I think what you're saying in terms of it does need to be a 2-year program and a 4-year program talking together, because my program, and it's not mine, but my approved program for state license under the ECU birth through kindergarten or birth through grade 3 is not exactly course by course the same as the one that Fort Hays has approved. And so it really does need to be program to program talking together.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I will mention that the Kansas Board of Regents governs the universities and coordinates with the technical colleges. So there's a limited amount of things that we can specifically do, or that the board can specifically do. But I've indicated, I put my email into the chat. I would like to pull on that thread a little bit and maybe see if we can do anything, maybe work together to make those requirements a little bit more simple across the state. And maybe lean on the universities and the technical and community colleges to help us in those efforts.
Sounds good.
So I had raised my hand, Tobias, and Eva. I think the graduation requirement task force is going to be speaking a little bit tomorrow on some of the work that we've been doing, looking at new revamps of high school graduation requirements. And I think one of the places that we definitely should be looking to tap into is when we start the transition skills and the transition assessments with our students at age 14 and up, asking them, do they have interest in working with littles, and giving them those exposures and experiences while they're in middle school, possibly reading with elementary kids or doing student tutoring, but giving them those opportunities when they're in high school so that when they go into college, they already know what they want to go into, maybe giving them those places to just plug in naturally instead of trying to find them at the college level. Just some ideas for maybe, I don't know what we would call it, peer mentoring, shadowing. I liked somebody over in the chat mentioned something about apprenticeship programs. That would be wonderful if we could do that at the high school level so that when they go into college, then they're just getting the classes done and they're getting the certification, but they already have the experience and the exposures in high school.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to draw attention to the comment. We did receive a response from Shane Carter, who's with the teacher licensure and accreditation team here at KSDE regarding, he says, an individual with elementary K through 6 is licensed appropriately to teach pre-K, gen ed only. And then we also received a question from Sabrina. Has there been any discussion of helping long-term substitutes get qualified as teachers? I believe in New Mexico, they have a program where if a long-term sub teaches for 3 years, they can become a certified teacher. And then it looks like Shane did respond to that one as well. Thank you, Shane. In regards to the substitute teaching moving to a license, we would advise this individual to pursue a non-traditional program such as Wichita State's TAP, limited apprentice license transition to teaching. And then we also, it looks like we have Liz, I saw your hand pop up if you want to go ahead.
Yes, I have a son with Down syndrome and he's in middle school, and I am very fortunate that he had got good teachers, qualified, but they have a circle of friends, which are kids with no disabilities, pairing with a kid with disability. And I hope those kids turn teachers or special ed. So I think it's a good idea to start in middle school, exposing them to help them in understanding and hopefully inspiring them to be teachers.
Thank you, Liz. Lisa, I saw your hand pop up as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to take off my hats and put my parent hat on. I also have a daughter with exceptionalities. She has Charge syndrome, so it's a leading syndrome for deaf blindness. And, you know, that's always an area that's hard to find, you know, people maybe that are qualified. You know, there's always this big discussion about whether a child who's deafblind would benefit from an intervener or an interpreter or not at all. And so I kind of agree with Liz, and I think, you know, starting these mentor programs off in middle school would be great. I myself, as a parent that has a child with exceptionalities, would love this. You know, my daughter's nonverbal, but she also has her cues and she also does gestures. So it wouldn't be hard for a middle school student to understand what she wants from them and vice versa. So I think this is an area that should definitely be looked into because I think it would be a great asset for the state.
So I was just going to real quick jump in, Lisa and Liz both. I think you're so absolutely right. I mean, if I look back at our applicants, you know, most of the students that are wanting to come into special education or to teach in special education or in early childhood special ed, they have had experiences before they come make that decision. And those experiences happened when they were adolescents, in most cases. Sometimes they had a family member, etc., so it may be longer. But for the majority of them, they had experiences either through camps or other kinds of sports experiences or community activities, and more, thankfully, more and more they've had experience through their school careers, as we've seen students with disabilities more fully included in their educational communities. But they come with those prior experiences, and that's what hooks them. And what I always say to our applicants, and as we're making decisions about who to come into our program, one of the things I always say is we can teach them the skills. We have the knowledge and the tools to teach them how to be excellent, high quality educators. What we can't do is give them the passion and the commitment for that. And I think those early experiences, Liz and Lisa, that you're talking about are exactly what we need to get that passion and that commitment going. So thank you for those comments.
One of the things that I think I like the circle of friends a lot. It is a win-win for both persons. But my son, he gets very, very connected with any kid with disability, not just with the Down syndrome. He has that kind of heart. But the school is he felt overwhelmed with academics. And so that he didn't want to go to add to the circle of friends. So I don't know what can be done so the child will not feel as a student overwhelmed with academic. I don't know what have to be done, but I think more kids will join the circle of friends if, I don't know what will be. But that was my son. He says, Mom, I cannot add more things. It's too much. So just to put that there.
Thank you, Liz. Looks like we did receive a couple additional comments here I want to draw attention to. Laura Smith Everett said that there's a set of people who have done most or all of their coursework but did not get their student teaching completed. She has 2 aides in her building that are in that boat. They're stuck with how to complete their student teaching and getting their certification while supporting a family. Marvin Miller also commented that their district sponsors 1 or 2 pairs a year and pays their pair salary while they student teach. If they then agree to work for 2 years in the district, and that finance piece is huge. We have a question from Tricia Wagner as well. Are there any attempts to address teachers leaving the field within the first couple years of teaching?
So I don't have the answer, Tricia, by any means. That has definitely been both on a national level and at a state level is a huge piece. When we talk about teacher shortages, we talk about both recruitment, which is the pipeline, totally important, but also retention. It's not going to do us any good to recruit a whole bunch of new folks and they're gone by the 3rd year of teaching, which unfortunately, particularly again in special education and also early childhood education, is a fact that it is very, very likely that our folks will leave the field within 3 years of beginning their teaching careers. And so, like I said, I don't have the answer, but it is, and again, unfortunately, I don't think there is an easy answer. I think the answer is literally tackling all of those shortage issues, the reasons for the shortage that I showed on the slide, those 4 issues. Well, 3 of the issues being, pay and benefits, respect, and respecting. Those 2 probably are the biggest challenges that we will continue to face and around teacher retention.
I think, last year before, time starting to run together, we did have a committee tied to Ciac that pulled in a lot of different people, including many of you I can see on the screen right now, to talk about what we could do. One of the things that we came up with was greater partnerships between the universities and the schools. And really, when we're talking about retention, what makes a big difference is their efficacy when they come in, their confidence and their ability that they can do their jobs. When they come in with a set of knowledge that they gained at a university, and they come into the school and they find it's not going well for them, that's when people leave. So how we can increase their efficacy is one way we can work on retention. Some schools and universities could use some partnerships to talk about what those students need when they arrive. There's some mismatches. Not every university, not every school. I don't know how many times I've worked in professional development and heard, why did nobody teach me this in the university level? Or I teach graduate classes and they're like, why didn't anybody teach me this in my bachelor's? Because it's simple, it's basic, and it's made a huge difference as we applied it this year. And those are great questions. There are things that they need to know. Having that open communication of here's what we're teaching, what do they need? And then how can we build upon that once they get to the school? I saw Bert had a comment in there about mentorship and a good administrator, right? How do we make a connection? And an example I would give you are learning styles. You would not believe how many people come out of universities, undergrad, thinking that I need to focus on kinesthetic learning, I need to focus on visual learning, I need all of that focus, when in reality, the effect size of that is very low. It's below average, it's 0.35. It doesn't make a huge difference. It can help with motivating. But if we spend all of our time trying to make something happen that doesn't have a big impact, we're not going to feel efficacy. But there are some things that have a high impact, like the high impact strategies from CEC, and I might be saying that incorrectly a little bit. Those can help teachers feel more efficacy when they come in. So part of that, a huge part, is the retention, because we know a lot of people leave. And right now there's all kinds of extra things going on that. So any way we can have a partnership between the 2 entities, and I work in both entities right now, I think it helps us a lot.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on a couple of the last comments. I attended a IEP boot camp that was put on by KSDE, /TASN. And the same thing happened there, where there were teachers that were learning things that it was really, very disheartening for me that they did not already know. And so I just, that's just a comment. I think really looking at, what they're learning and how they're being prepared, and kind of that real world kind of knowledge that they're going to need, because I think it really puts them, in tough situations sometimes. So that's all.
All right, I think Lena have something to say next.
Yeah, thanks. I would just add, one of the things as, the district level employer, special ed director, that we see is that, especially new staff just coming out, it may not be that you haven't talked about those things. It's they're so overwhelmed at the beginning of the year, they couldn't hear them, they couldn't process them. And so what we're finding is, really the need to have more targeted, useful trainings and professional development that are the nuts and bolts about how to do your job. Like those first 2 to 3 years is not about let's learn a new teaching strategy. It's about, this is how you fill out an IEP goal, or this is how you do progress monitoring. And so really trying to be more intentional with professional development And I think, coming back to the districts I serve, it's so hard when you talk about how many small districts we have in Kansas, that don't have people to do their PD. They don't have, anybody in their district office, or a principal's also the superintendent, or the SPED director's also the school psychologist, or all those kind of things. Those are challenges that we all face. And so, we really are just trying to work on the quality of the work environment, and mentoring is huge, and having supportive administration, and then just the best we can, trying not to add extra things onto people's plates if they're not necessary. And so all of those are the things we're doing, but so much of that is out of our control throughout the pandemic. But really, I think we've been pretty fortunate not to have more people leaving than we have, because certainly there's days I think that we all wonder, do I really want to come back to work tomorrow? So I think there's just a lot of factors, but those are the main things we're working on.
Thank you, Lena. Lisa?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to speak from a parent perspective, and I feel like what's also could be important here is having those parents who maybe have been in the weeds of, the special education program for several years now, I think would be a great asset to maybe new teachers that are coming in, and maybe can even like lean on them for support, and I'm all in favor of a new teacher in the special education field using me as a guinea pig to kind of help them out and help them, start down this path on what they're supposed to do, but like use me as, what is it, what's been done in the past, or, was that okay on how it was done? Or what do you suggest? Like, what are parents really wanting from me as a special education teacher? And my daughter just got a new O&M specialist this year. Well, I introduced myself through an email, and then I also agreed to meet her the first time she was going to meet my daughter. That way she could ask me questions that I knew about my daughter instead of having to try to figure it out. I mean, yes, it's great for her to figure things out on her own, but it's also nice to have that parent support, especially when the parent already knows, the quirks of her daughter, of their child, and, things that might be able to help this therapist with my daughter. I just think having the support from parents in these kind of situations is beneficial, and maybe hopefully help with teacher retention. I don't know, hopefully.
No, I think you're right, that's definitely an underutilized resource. And I would say I probably learned just as much from parents of students as I learned from colleagues along the way. So that's a good point. Anyone else have anything you'd like to discuss?
This is Tobias. I put something in the chat about the state mentorship, if whether it was a statewide program or not, and there was some good feedback from that. I can tell you that when I was teaching, I was in an elective course, and we had a program in which I had someone at the school level that was able to mentor me through just the basic procedures from the school, but I was the only teacher of that subject in that space. So I also had another mentor unofficially from another neighboring district that really helped me with a lot of the content specific. So I wonder if the mentorship program could be extended to not only having someone to helps you, hey, here's where the restrooms are, here's where the lunchroom is, and those very local specific types of mentoring opportunities, but also someone that is more regional that could oversee some of the content specific. That might help with some of the small district issues that are available. And I know that funding is always going to be an issue, but if there were some sort of regional mentorship as well as a local mentorship, I know that that's going to require more of the mentee. But maybe there's also, if we're talking, pie in the sky ideas, maybe that mentee also gets paid a stipend for the extra paperwork that they're going to be having to do with one or two mentors.
I'm a parent representative, but I'm actually a K-12, a K-6 educator. And I just wanted to say that I think I'm at year 20, maybe year 19. And there's never been a year that I haven't learned something new. So I've lived in 3 states and I've worked for 8 different schools. And every single one is unique. And the set of things you learn in one does not apply apples to apples to another. So I think systemically, we have some rethinking to do as people that support educators, that it's never going to be the case that somebody comes in and knows how to do the thing. But instead, it is our job as I was an instructional coach for 8 years. It is our job to equip them to be able to be flexible and be able to retool what they already know to apply it to the new thing. Because I think otherwise part of the burnout is, and I'll be really frank with you, I've gotten more of sort of a sarcastic, like, you don't know that from my Kansas colleagues than I did in the other places I worked, which was Texas, California, Missouri. There's this sort of like, well, yeah, do it. Well, that doesn't mean that's the way everybody does it. And it's really difficult to be in a position where people continue to tell you you don't know the right thing, when what we could be doing is retooling it to say, oh, well, the way you did that here is this is how we do it, or the way you did it there, this is how we do it here. That allows a person to walk away with some dignity and some feeling that they did know things and they're just learning to apply it in a new way. And I just want to echo that as an educator, because I think one of the burnouts I hear from my very young teachers is people kind of giving them a tone of like, you don't know that type of thing. And there is nothing to undo a person's self-esteem or belief that this is the right career than being told over and over they don't know the right thing. So I'll get off my soapbox. I just had to say that. Thanks.
So I'm going to jump in real quick, Laura. I really, really appreciate what you just said, because I think that is absolutely critical. And I know we talk about, people coming from the university, and of course, I'm going to take personal offense to, well, the university didn't get them prepared. I think we do need to be careful about that. We don't need to pit the school district against the university or the current, and you just said it so incredibly well, is not only does that impact that person's sense of self-efficacy and ability to do the job, but it also doesn't move us forward if we're sort of pointing fingers at each other in terms of this issue. So thank you for saying that and saying it so well.
I was just giving it a minute to see if anybody else had anything they wanted to add. We had so much great conversation around this topic that it's hard to know when we're kind of exhausted of what we have to say. So are there any other comments that we would like to make here, or questions they'd like to leave us with before we move on? Or if you think of any, you can put them in the chat later, I guess, also. I'm looking for any more hands. Okay. Well, that was great, Eva. I really do appreciate that. That was obviously a very, very intriguing subject for everyone here, because we all had a lot to say about it. So thank you for your time and presenting that. And next, I'm going to hand it over to Jordan for the annual update for the SICC.
Thank you, Jennifer. And there should be some slides I think Kayla's running through here. So for those of you that don't know me, I serve as staff to our state ICC. I also work with the early childhood team here at the Department of Education, as well as the infant toddler team at the Department of Health and Environment. So kind of a overlapping state role there, birth to 5. I promised to keep this pretty brief, but just wanted to kind of give our Ciac members kind of an overview and get you up to speed on several of the items that the ICC has been working on over the last year since we last met, as well as some of our current and upcoming activities for the next year. I think the first thing will get you a little bit up to speed in terms of our new membership. Our Department for Aging and Disability Services rep is now Doug Bowman. We did a couple years add a Medicaid rep. The new person in that role on the ICC is Laura Leestra. We have a couple new parent members that have joined us over the past couple years, both Laura Smith-Everett on today, as well as Lori Schmidt, who's also joining us today. We have a new public member, Alex Redcorn, who unfortunately is not able to join us today. We did add an additional DCF position focused more on foster care. So Melinda Klein joined our council as well. And then we do have a somewhat new now state Part C coordinator. So representing that on our council is Trisha Wagner, who's also here with us today. All of our membership does go through the governor's appointments office. So we are down a few members right now. We have a couple parent members and provider members that we are currently waiting to hear back on from the appointments office. And then we'll be getting close to being back to our max number of 25 members. So just a quick update there regarding our membership. Our meeting schedule has continued as normal. This is a schedule we switched to a few years back now. We typically meet the third Friday of each month in the afternoon. We did continue to decide on that schedule. It flexes nicely with the early childhood recommendations panel. They meet those same days, but in the morning, and we have some overlapping members between those two councils. At a majority of our meetings, we try to have both a local program presentation. So this might be an infant toddler program, one of our Tiny K programs, a preschool program, or a parents as teachers program. And then we also try to have something that's more of a statewide system of development and support presentation as well, to kind of give both a state and local feel at each one of our monthly meetings. Here is just a slide outlining a few of our local program presentations over the past year. So all of these ones listed here currently are some of our Tiny K programs across the state. So it's really, really nice hearing them come and provide data, especially in terms of during COVID, their drops and referrals, and some of the struggles and challenges and ways they've adapted to this new world we're currently living in. So it's been really important to have them come and present to our council over the last few years. And then we are able to include some of their feedback in our annual report that is sent to the governor's office each August. Go ahead and next slide, please. These are just some of our other presentations and topics we've focused on over the last year. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Ages and Stages questionnaire. Originally, this was just a preschool and kindergarten readiness screening that has since expanded to statewide implementation with our Part C programs as well. So they can now have community providers and partners be added into the screening system and begin doing ASQ screenings with children they serve as well. We did receive or have a meeting dedicated to the Child Care Development Fund, and we're able to provide some feedback on that item as a council. We continue to get updates on a consistent basis regarding the preschool development grant, as well as the Kansas Deafblind project. We did have the Kansas Insurance Department come and attend, and we were able to send some questions ahead of time regarding billing for our Part C programs, as well as Medicaid. We had several national staff from the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, or ECTA, attend one of our meetings as well. We had the Kansas School for the Deaf come and share about some of their outreach services that they offer. Each year, the ICC also reviews the state performance plan and annual performance report, does the overview of that, and then approves that before it is sent on to OSEP. And then also we did a slightly different orientation for our members. We try to do that once a year. But over this summer, we did, for our strategic planning meeting, we had the Learning Tree Institute come and do a training with all of our state ICC members out of Greenbush. So that was also a successful presentation and meeting we had over the summer. Currently, these are our working subcommittees of the state ICC. We have the Early Childhood Funding Committee. One of our new committees is the Early Childhood Least Restrictive Environment Committee, and I can go into it in a little more detail here in a minute. We have our local ICC Annual Retreat and Support Committee, our Executive Committee, which meets and essentially plans our monthly meetings, and also acts on behalf of the councils if items come up in between meetings. And then, as I just mentioned, the SPP APR committee, which focuses on that report each year. A few of our major achievements, the SPP APR approval and review each year. One of the neat things with the ECLRE committee, so this was largely built upon work that was done by Julie Rand with KSDE. She had gone out and looked at indicator data and least restrictive environment data with school districts. She looked and met with districts that had very high LRE scores as well as very low LRE scores, and brought a lot of that information back to our state ICC meetings on several occasions. The ICC decided to adapt that slightly and look at the similar areas that those districts were found, and then meet with licensed child care providers and get a sense of what LRE meant to them and how it properly functions, just to see what kind of comparisons we can draw with that work. So we sent out a survey to several different regions of the state, collected a lot of that feedback. And then actually later this month, we're going to sit down and do a focus group discussion with some of those providers. And Dr. Horn and KU have been very integral in that work and have been members of that committee since the start. So really exciting work going on with that group. And they'll be actually providing an additional update at the Kansas Division for Early Childhood KDEC conference coming up in February. With the meeting format, we tried to continue to educate all of our council members with both the local program and state system updates at each meeting. Last April, we did hold the first ever local ICC retreat. So if you're not familiar with what a local ICC is, for each of the roughly 30 Tiny K programs, there's at least one local ICC paired within their geographical boundary. And what we tried to do was pull them all together for the first time, provide some support, some ideas, breakout sessions, connections they could make between one another. So that was the first time we've done an event like that. Was really successful. So we do plan on doing that again coming up here in a few months. During the pandemic, our local ICCs have continued to meet. Most of them can currently meet virtually, so we continue to have great connections with them. And in some regards, it's kind of a mixed bag with most things during the pandemic, but In some regards, we've actually seen increased partnerships, especially with parent members being able to attend these meetings at a local level, virtually having that access to join via Zoom or through other programs. So not all bad from that, but continue to have strong connections with those local councils. And then also here more recently, we've had more partnership with the Early Childhood Recommendations Panel. They have a work group called the Quality and Environments Work Group. So Dave and I have been able to attend several of those work group meetings, and they've been working on recommendations for not just the state ICC, but other councils and partners as well. But really looking forward to some of that continued work as it develops in that partnership with that work group and the recommendations panel as a whole. As always, we do set our tentative meeting schedule and goals and objectives for the year. We do that every June when we have our strategic planning meeting at the end of the fiscal year. But if there's any items that Ciac members or guests feel that might be important to bring to the state ICC, please always feel free to bring that to my attention or Dave or Lisa, they're our chair and vice chair. We're always looking for additional items to work on as a council. I do want to mention as well, we do have a council website, kansasicc.org. So you can feel free to visit that for additional information and items I may not have covered today. Especially like our annual reports are really good, concise item you can access on there, similar to what Ciac has on their own webpage on KSDE, but really a good way to get caught up on some of our activities for the last year or so. So with that, I know I kind of burned through that pretty quick, but are there any additional questions that I could potentially answer today? And if you think of something after the fact, my contact information is here as well. So please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And Dave or Lisa, if I missed anything that you would like to include, please feel free to chime in as well.
Jordan, I don't have anything to add. I think you gave a nice, concise, brief overview of the activities of the council, and much like Ciac, you know, we always have an open comment period during our meetings and welcome anyone to come and be a part of our meetings.
And this is Lisa. I also agree with Dave. I have nothing else really to add. And Jordan, I think you did a great job with your overview. Thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, that was a great overview. And we're still running a little bit ahead, but I know Shane was in here. If he's still in here, we could go ahead and move on to Shane Carter talking about unified licenses.
Oh, I do apologize for that. I'm having a few computer issues. I have a screen in my office, and anytime I try to use it, it ends up breaking my computer. So I apologize for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shane Carter. I'm the Assistant Director for Teacher Licensure and Accreditation here at the agency. I've been in this position for a few months, about 4 months. You probably were very familiar with my counterpart, Susan Helbert. She did retire back in September, and then I moved into this position. And I understand now that there was quite a bit of items that Susan took care of that I was not aware, and a lot of these briefings. So I've been going through a learning process, and I believe this is my first time speaking with this group today. So thank you for the opportunity. and I appreciate you allowing me to be here. So today we're going to cover over unified endorsements. That's the main topic that I'll discuss. However, most of you have probably heard the recommendation that was approved by the board today. So if you do have questions about the temporary emergency authorized license for substitutes, we can cover that, or any questions in general you may have. There was great discussion earlier amongst the group for the teacher shortage and mentoring and other things. So I'm kind of involved in that through my position with some other committees and things. So if you do have questions regarding to that, then feel free to ask those as well. I just didn't want to jump in and then take over too much time. I know you all have a specific set of work that you need to get done, and I don't want to take from that. So with that long introduction, I will go ahead and move into the presentation. All right, so here's the agenda. First, we'll just go over the endorsement types real quick. And on the next slide, they are the early childhood unified, elementary education unified, secondary education unified, and then I'll provide you some additional information about licensing, testing, et cetera, or assignments, whatever's needed. So if you want to move on to the next slide, we'll get into the endorsement types. So the three types that we offer are the early childhood unified. There's a birth to kindergarten endorsement. There's a birth to grade 3 endorsement for the early childhood unified. The elementary education unified K to 6. It's K to 6 right now. At this time, we do have regulations pending approval that have been in the process for approximately 5 years. So, well, actually, it's not that long, about 4 years. But once those are approved and we can implement those, we will be changing elementary K to 6 to elementary pre-K to 6. So there was a question earlier in which an individual had asked a question about an elementary K to 6 person teaching pre-K. Well, right now by policy, we allow that for an individual that holds a K to 6 license. They can teach general education at the pre-K level, but it will be official in the regulation once those are approved. We, as of December 1st, those were sent back over to be reviewed. There's like 3 different entities that have to review them. They're back to that first entity, and then hopefully within the next 90 days, my fingers are crossed, we can finally get this completed and put that set of regulations to bed and start working on the next one. Secondary education unified, it's a 6 to 12 license, and we'll cover it in a little more detail. Next slide, please. So the early childhood unified. So as I stated earlier, it's issued at birth to K or birth to grade 3. So an individual that holds this license has been prepared to teach the general education aspect of early childhood, and then also provide those support services for high incidence and low incidence at either the birth to K or birth to grade 3 level. So as far as licensing goes, very versatile, whereas a lot of other licenses are either content specific or service specific to what that individual can provide. The early childhood unified allows the individual, they've been trained to do all those areas. If you go on to the next slide. So as far as this particular license, if an individual completes the birth to K program versus the birth to grade 3, there are different requirements to qualify for that license. There are some change in the coursework and also the testing that's required. Now, both of these licenses are waiverable. So if you have an individual that holds some other type of standard teaching license and they want to enroll in an early childhood unified program, and you want to place them in assignment for early childhood at the district level, a district can apply for a waiver. And then once minimum requirements are met, they can qualify for that provisional license. And the minimum requirements for special education are 3 courses, a course on characteristics, a course on methods, and then a practicum. Once those are completed, the individual can qualify for that provisional license. A little bit of confusion that individuals, I've noticed that, from my licensing time, is an individual may complete the birth to grade 3 program, but end up taking the wrong praxis test. So on ETS's website, if an individual goes to Kansas requirements, it'll outline for each of the endorsement types which tests to take. And we would always recommend that an individual go to ETS to just verify that that is the most accurate test. before they register, because there is an option that you can register without checking your state's requirements. We discourage that. Always go to the state site and then register there. So for that early childhood unified birth to K, the praxis test is 5023, the interdisciplinary early childhood education praxis test code, or early childhood education praxis test. Now, if you look down to birth to grade 3, you know, obviously there's a difference. When an individual is completing that birth to grade 3 program, there are 2 tests that they have to take. The education of young children, so that's geared more towards the general education aspect of teaching young children. And then the second half, the special education preschool to early childhood endorsement. As far as tests, I would like to put out approximately every 10 years, or in some cases, there's changes that are made earlier than 10 years. ETS will revise and make changes to tests. They'll ask for volunteers from the field, from higher education to sit on panels and participate in setting the standards or cut scores for those particular tests. So occasionally our office puts out a request for individuals if you'd like to volunteer and participate in that. Just wanted you to be aware. But in the near future, these special education tests could change. Next slide, please. Early childhood additional information. So there was discussion earlier about the teacher shortage and, you know, finding teachers for the classroom. That's why I wanted to bring up the Wichita State Teacher Apprentice program. So it's a program, it's labeled as an innovative program at Wichita State that allows individuals to teach in either an elementary K-6 or birth to grade 3, early childhood birth to grade 3 position. When individuals finish this program, they can actually come out with an elementary K-6 license and an early childhood unified birth to grade 3 license. So very versatile program. The innovative part of it is individuals, let's say if they, so there's education requirements, and depending on your education requirements, you can start the program at different areas and qualify for the TAP license. But let's take an individual coming out of high school. They enter this program after they complete 60 college credit hours. Wichita State front loads a lot of their professional education courses, and that's kind of front loaded to the beginning of the program. And then they work on some of those general education requirements, you know, your English 102 or your college algebra that may show up later in later in this program versus a standard bachelor's degree program. So, but once they hit that 60 college credit mark, they can qualify for the TAP license, which allows them to be hired, work full-time in a early childhood or elementary position, just like any other teacher. They finish their program, which, you know, could take up to 2 years, 2.5 years. Most of the plans, when an individual qualifies, they end up with a license that's 2.5 years right now. But once they finish the program, complete their testing, then they qualify for initial license, just like your standard program completers. Now, individuals that have a bachelor's degree, it's a little different for them after they complete what we call an academic year of coursework. So it ends up being close to around a little more than 18 college credit hours. Then they're eligible for the license, and then they'll continue. They can get issued the TAP license and teach while they finish the rest of the program. But this is just one of those routes to the class. So I'll call it a non-traditional route to the classroom that's available at this time. Next slide, please. The Elementary Education Unified. This is a newer, I'll phrase it as newer compared to a lot of our other endorsement areas. It is issued at the K-6 grade level, and the educator can teach general education at the pre-K to grade 6 level, and then provide high incidence support at the K-6 level and low incidence support services as well. Now, I thought this would be an easy question to research and answer because a lot of this work happened in the agency before I came back to it, so I wasn't as familiar with it. So I went back through notes and different meetings that took place back from 2015 through 2017. 2017 is when the standards were officially adopted, and there was a lot of conversation, you know, specifically in regards to the type of special education support that this particular license would be able to provide. At one point, it was going to be just high incidence only. There was back and forth, but at the end, before it was finalized, it was determined that this particular license, it would be a holistic look at providing those services. So an individual that has it can provide both those high incidence and low incidence supports services. If you go to the next slide. Testing. So once again, this particular endorsement requires 2 tests: the elementary education content knowledge for teaching, which is Praxis test code 7811. But this particular test has changed in that 7811 is the umbrella for the elementary education content knowledge for teaching test. Their subtests, they're broken down 7812, 13, 14, and 15 for each of those content areas. So though it says 7811, there's subtests that an individual takes, and once they pass each of those, they pass the 7811 requirement. A unique aspect of this test, why the change? So it allows, if an individual in the past, if an individual didn't pass one of the content areas, say they passed the English language arts, the mathematics, the science, but didn't pass the history, government, social studies, they had to take the whole entire test again. So for each of those content areas. With this particular test now, they passed the English language arts, science, and math. They did not pass the history, government, social studies. All they have to do is retake the history, government, social studies. They get a passing score on that, and then they've passed the 7811. These individuals also need to take and pass the special education core knowledge and applications praxis test, and that specific test code is 5354. I did go and take a look at the breakdown of the test because I wanted to do a little more research on it. And as far as the makeup of the test, there are questions that are geared toward individuals with mild to profound, or individuals that have mild to profound disabilities. So that full spectrum of high incidence and low incidence special ed would be included in that particular exam. Next slide, please. All right, the secondary education unified, it is in our regulations. However, there are no universities that offer a program for it at this time. And to be quite honest, I think a lot of institutions are struggling with how to implement this, because by definition, if it's for secondary education, you're basically saying it's, all the content areas at the 6 to 12 grade level. You're talking physics, math, history, government, social studies. How do you develop a program that incorporates all that? And then also the special education piece. Very difficult. The standards are there, but there are no programs offered at this time. And we haven't had any university say that they're wanting to start this program, but it is in regulation. It's just not used at this time. Next slide. All right, so I wasn't for sure how much time I was going to have, nor kind of your level. So this was a very basic presentation on a particular type of licenses. So, I mean, if I'm asked to come back and you need more detailed information, by all means, I can do that. But at this time, I'll turn it over if you have specific questions you'd like to ask, and it can be related to the unified endorsement, or if you would like a rundown of this temporary emergency authorized license, I can do that as well, or answer any other questions you have. Okay, no questions?
I find that shocking, as many questions as we had about licensure earlier. So,
Jennifer, I have a question.
Okay.
I'd like Shane to go over that temporary emergency license.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so today the board did approve a recommendation for the temporary emergency authorized license, which we'll call the TEAL. This particular license, I'll kind of gear it towards the discussion we had earlier. I just want you to know this license, we're not trying to devalue education. No, that was no one's intent or goal. It's actually the reverse. We know teachers are stressed. They have, school districts are having issues keeping buildings open with basically managing and controlling classes due to a lack of shortage of teachers getting sick, or teachers that have left the professions, whatever the case may be. So this particular license, it's not intended to allow an individual to teach long-term or serve in any type of position. It's geared towards allowing individuals to intermittently serve. So, you need somebody to cover a day, and you don't have a licensed teacher or an individual that holds that emergency sub license. You've decided you wanted to hire an individual to serve on this till. You could use them to fill in the classroom, to cover a day here, day there. So it's a last resort, short-term license that's used to assist educators in the field. Now, kind of the key concepts of the license. One, the requirements, I'll cover that. The individual has to be 18 years old at a minimum, have a high school diploma. They have to have been considered or have an offer from hire from a district to apply for this license. That's what separates it from our other license. Other license, you meet a requirement, you can apply. You just apply. These individuals, they will have to have contact with that district first, and the district will say, yes, we would like to hire you to serve in this position. So once that application is filled out and submitted, it'll go through the district or private school, accredited private school, and they'll verify that they plan to use this individual. And that employment piece verification is imperative. If we don't have it, the person's not getting the license. So one of our criteria for developing this license, educator and student safety, that was one of our main goals. The next was implementation time, and then the third was what would best serve the field and provide the LEA's flexibility. So after we went through a whole host of options and started trimming down what we're going to do, this was the best thing that we can come up with. I mean, there's pros to it, there's cons, and I understand both sides of the argument. But based on some of the conversation I have, I just want you to know we're not trying to diminish or tarnish the professionalism of the education field. Not at all. We're just trying to provide something that helps, and hopefully this will help.
Shane, a quick question.
Yep.
Is that a paper license that will be issued, and does the person have to have a fingerprint check?
Yes. So with all of our other applications, there's an application fee. We've waived an application fee for this particular license, but the individual will still need to submit a fingerprint card to our office with a $50 background check fee. We can't waive the fee. We're charged a fee for our background check clearances that we receive back. So that's why we have to keep that fee in place.
I see Marvin has a question.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Shane, hey, thank you for this. You just answered. I was about to take my hand down. Thank you for waiving that KSDE fee. My building's got 18 teachers out today. It's crazy. We have great paras that have worked a long time that don't have college credits. So this helps all of us. So I don't think as teachers we feel unappreciated. We're trying just to figure out how to cover holes. So thank you guys for doing this. And that answers my question about the $50 fingerprint fee. I do have a follow-up question, somewhat unrelated. I actually pay for my parents once they get the credits to get their sub fees, so I can actually come to meetings like this. But I've noticed that a lot of the delay is through the fingerprint and stuff. When I was teaching in California over a decade ago, we did digital fingerprints and we got results within 2 days. Is there any discussion about doing that to make it faster and easier?
Yes. So to answer your question, yes. Right now, what we've built it due to COVID. The challenge is we started building this, what we'll call an online fingerprint portal. So this is kind of a piece of how we collect payment for a background check. And we had to coordinate with KBI. KBI has a live scan system that they started implementing, which is probably similar to what was used in California. So there are a couple of issues with the live scan. So it's not mandatory for all agencies that provide fingerprints in the state of Kansas to utilize a live scan machine. So some of these services may not be available for some individuals in their counties or cities. You potentially have to drive to another county or city to take advantage of this live scan service. But the live scan machines are out there. We do have an agency code now. We had to finish working on getting a way for payments to be submitted and tracked, which we have, and we'll be implementing that shortly. The goal is to have all that out. I hesitate sometimes to put this out there, but we're aiming for around March 1st, and then those live scans, individuals could start using that. And then what that does, it'll decrease the amount of time it takes to mail a hard fingerprint card to our office, which right now with the mail being slow, it could take 10 days for us to get a card from Manhattan, Kansas, or Kansas City, believe it or not, 10 days. So it would decrease that time. As soon as the fingerprint is submitted, it's sent over to KBI immediately, and then we can log into a system that we have access on our side, and then we can say, yep, that's our fingerprint. Would you go ahead and process that? And then they charge us our fee. So that is part of our initiative to speed things up in our office. So hopefully I'm hoping before spring graduates, that's finished and operational. Now, there is one caveat I would like to add to that as well. Each entity that offers the service, they choose their fee. And KBI posts a document on their website for fingerprints that lists what those fees are. And in some cases for the live scan, there are sheriffs and local police departments that are charging upwards of $125 for this service. So just be aware of that. Not all of them. Most of them, it's a reasonable, same 15, 20 bucks. Some of them are free, but it will depend on that local law enforcement agency that's providing those services, how much that additional cost to have those prints taken is. And that's separate from our $50 fee.
I'll ask a follow-up question. In California years ago, we didn't just have Leos do it. Is there any discussion of having larger HR departments, say a Wichita, or smaller towns can't do it, but being able to scan their own fingerprints? Or is there a chain of custody issue in there?
No. So there are actually a few school districts that actually have that option right now as we speak. I think Kansas City, Shawnee Mission, and I believe Lawrence is the other that I don't know if they're utilizing it or not at this time, but some schools have requested that, and you have to go through the KBI, get approval, you get a code, an agency code, we'll call it, and then that entity could be authorized to take fingerprints. Now, there is, as with everything else, nothing's easy. That's what I've learned on this job. So an agency, when KBI does a background check, they release a background clearance to an agency. Whatever that agency code, they can't share it with another agency by statute. They can only give it to one individual. So if a individual goes to have their fingerprints taken at the school district, that clearance is provided to the school district. We can't have that. We can't use that one. It can't be released to us. We have to do another through KBI. So that sometimes could cause confusion, but what could happen is if an individual has that live scan machine in their district, they have their fingerprints taken, they just enter in our code, the KSDE code, as the agency for that background check, then those fingerprints would be sent to us, and then we would be charged for them and collect that fee. So that's the only potential issue that could happen if an individual takes fingerprints at a local school district.
I see Lena has a question too.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment that we just this past school year, I think, had some of our staff trained to take fingerprints. So the KBI does that training via Zoom, and we did have to buy like all the fingerprinting materials. And so we just found that our local law enforcement was getting really restrictive on when or if they were going to be available for it. And so it's not a lot of work. We don't have the live scan, but we just have the fingerprint cards, take the prints, and then get the staff back out to the building. And for those that operate any childcare, that's really why we did it, because of all the KDHE childcare requirements, and fingerprinting was getting really pricey. So it's not too hard to do if you wanted to do it. It's just a KBI training.
Shane, are there any limits on the amount of days this person can sub in the same position?
Yeah, so tomorrow we're going to approach this again with the superintendent, send them out the application. So this is not a long-term solution. So we would not expect districts to try to use this individual in a long-term position. Did we specify a number of days on the license? No, we did not. But once again, this should not be a long-term solution. This individual shouldn't be filling a long-term sub. But at the end of the day, districts need flexibility. Private schools based on their staffing situation. So, but the license was aimed to allow an individual to intermittently serve in different classrooms and not fill that long-term position.
Is it only for this year? Does it carry over to next year too?
So as of now, it will expire on June 1st of 2022. As part of the recommendation today, the board wanted us to gather additional information on this, working with the district's private schools that utilize the license. We'll also track data as far as the number of applicants and types of number of licenses we issue. And then we'll go back to the board with this information. And then there may be some other type of determination. But once again, this was implemented as a short-term emergency type license. And when we designed it, we did not intend for it to go past this year. The school year, excuse me.
Thank you.
And let's see, I did see a question in the chat. It's from Ann. I just had a staff that finished their early childhood unified birth to grade 3 license through Wichita State TAP. She's been a pre-K teacher during her school, and after the first semester, she was able to qualify as a lead teacher. I now have a second pre-K assistant in the program. Excellent, that's good, and hopefully that program's working for you, and it's supposed to be a collaborative effort from Wichita State and the school district. So hopefully they're providing their support to those candidates and helping you all as well.
Shane Marvin here. I got another question real quick. Okay, so I have a 19-year-old, and I understand districts can actually set the age if they want 21 or older too, but if I have a 19-year-old, they do their fingerprints, they work, this expires, they finish up their 60 units so they can apply for their e-sub. They have to retake the fingerprints, or will the fingerprints stay on file?
No. So depending on when they meet that requirement. So typically, and I'll explain the fingerprint process real quick. So when an individual has their prints taken, we can keep them on file for 6 months. If we don't receive an application at that point, we have to purge those fingerprints. They're removed from the RATBAC system that we use through KBI, because once we get someone enrolled, as long as they maintain a valid license, they stay enrolled in this RAP is what we'll call it. Well, that's what it's called. So RAP provides us reports if someone were to do something that required law enforcement intervention or whatnot, or were charged for something, then as soon as that's entered into the system, we get notified about it. So that's that part of the enrollment. But if an individual becomes disenrolled in RAP and then they apply again for a license, we have to get another set of fingerprints, and then another background check fee to get them re-enrolled, because that's the only way KBI will enroll them back into the system.
So essentially, if they don't submit a e-sub license by June 1st, 2022, their fingerprints drop out of the system then?
Well, I can work on the date that they're removed from that particular RAP report. So when we go back to the board, there was discussion about possibly extending this to June 30th, like a standard license. So that may be, that's gonna be more discussion we're gonna have on. But yes, there's certain, I have a little leeway of what I can do as far as adjusting when someone's removed from RAP. But we are charged every year when an individual's in RAP. That's why we have to have a valid license, because we plug that into the licensing fee. And if someone expires, we're not receiving that fee, and then we get charged for it. So that's why we have to pull them out.
Okay, thank you.
See, Tobias has a question.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I mean, we've discussed fingerprints for I don't know. It seems like about 10 or 15 minutes almost, and I'm wondering if there's a way to streamline that, a way if it seems like a stumbling block to licensure. I mean, I'm pretty certain that my social security number is in some database somewhere that's never going to go away. Is there a reason that the fingerprints can't be in some database that just never goes away?
Oh yeah, well, yeah. So
I'm sure
they are in a
database.
It becomes more of who can receive information if there's a change in that criminal history check that's done. So that's where the rub is. And for us, for our agency, we can only get a background check through KBI. I had a top secret government clearance till like last year or whatever, 2 years ago. I still had to do my fingerprints through here. I've been investigated by FBI, everybody, for that clearance, and it doesn't matter. we, based on statutes and requirements, we have to go through KBI and have that information delivered to us through them.
I understand that, but I'm just it seems like it's a stumbling block that could be hurdled somehow a little more easily.
Yeah. We'll blame it on red tape and bureaucracy at its finest. That's what we'll label that.
I understand. Well, I am bureaucracy, so I get it.
Marvin, did you have another question? As your hand just okay, all right, just making sure. Any other questions or conversations? Okay, well, that was great information and really good timing with having that just come out today. So that was really good timing to have you here and answer that question, or all the questions about that topic.
Okay.
Our next on our agenda is a break. So is the ICC going to be back with us after the break or not? I guess I wasn't clear on that looking at the agenda.
Yes, they will be.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know if we should say anything to them before they go. All right, so let's take a 15-minute break and come back at 3:10. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started and get back to the agenda. And the first thing that we have on here for after break is the Ciac annual update. And Bert and I will both be talking about that. I think Bert's going to take the lead to begin with. This morning, Tricia and I, along with Brian Dempsey from KSDE, did that annual report. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that.
So Jennifer, would you like for me to introduce the topic?
I didn't know. I honestly couldn't remember what we said we were going to do this part yesterday. I think we were so focused on the morning part. I know we said we were just going to really quickly gloss over it. So no, it's fine. So basically we just had an introduction and go on to the next slide. And then we talked about the roles of Ciac and a little bit really quickly about what goes into making this decision, that, the nomination, that they're nominated or apply or nominated, and that then this member not only has to be qualified for the role that they're applying for or nominated for, but also we're looking to have that good representation across state board regions, and that we are having to meet our majority rule. So just mention that, and then went over the different roles that Ciac represents.
Jennifer, I might mention the majority rule for you on SICC means that the majority of the members have to be a person with a disability or have a child with a disability between the ages of birth and age 26.
And currently, so we have 21 voting members, and currently 14 of our voting members do fulfill that category. So it's not just a member of, I guess I do think that's really important for people to understand, is that when people apply, of course, we're looking for their caliber of, like, we want someone to be qualified for the position that they're applying for. Obviously, that's our top priority. But then we do have to make sure we're meeting that majority rule. And we also we've come to understand in recent years that the board really wants us to have representation on Ciac from all of their board regions, but that just makes sense that we have representation from across the whole state. So those are things we take into consideration too. So just, if someone who didn't, who applied for this council and they weren't selected, it's probably has more to do with the fact that, board representation and board region representation, or that majority rule than the fact that they just weren't qualified. Because if we had 4 different candidates and one of them that checked all of those boxes, then that's how that turns out. Next slide, please. And we also mentioned our non-voting ex officio representatives, which was just a mention. And then the next 3 slides were Tricia, so I'm going to let her talk about those if you are good with that, Tricia. Put you on this. I don't mean to put you on the spot. So if you're not good with that, that's fine. I can just quickly review them.
Tricia has not made it back on.
Okay. So Tricia she did a very nice job of going over the stuff in way more detail. You said that here we were just going to quickly gloss over it. So these are just the things that we talked about. Again, she did a very nice job of explaining them, but letting them know some things that Ciac has been up to in the last year. Personnel shortages, which obviously continues to be a topic of discussion. That we formed that membership committee, which for those of you who aren't aware, prior to our membership committee, that unofficial membership committee really was the leadership team. And so it's been nice having a committee that's dedicated to that purpose. Received and reviewed the navigating change document. Of course, this has been huge for everybody in the last 3 years, dealing with all the different hybrid, remote, and on-site versus remote or hybrid learning opportunities, and how those impact our students with disabilities and what that would look like. That secondary transition document that was created, she talked about that in good detail. I'm really not doing justice to Tricia's part here, so I apologize for that. And then think we have more on the next page. It's still about the year in review. And about the fact that we have the joint meetings every year with the ICC, legislative sessions, some of the legislative discussions that, topics that were discussed, like the homeless data, the funding for special education, teacher shortages, again, that comes up pretty frequently, ESSER funds, the state performance plan and annual performance review requirements that Bert went over the last time with us, and then providing feedback to the special education and title services team. I mean, again, she did a really good job of giving examples for all of these, but sorry, I don't have her examples ready to go on that. She hasn't joined us yet, has she? Because I hate to butcher this and her be sitting there.
No, she hasn't.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad thank you for watching that. And then administrative licensure. This was huge. I know under Heath's leadership last year, this is a big thing that I feel like we spent a lot of time on this last year because we know that that's as much of a problem for districts as teacher licensure or finding paras, which is a question that like we were asked by a board member this morning, was about how we're helping find even like staff at the para level, because we are kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's wonderful that we're getting these para educators licensed and that we have a great alternative path for them to become teachers. That's wonderful, but we still need somebody ready to come in and fulfill those roles that they're leaving. And so it's just the domino effect. And then transitions, ongoing from like the previous year, we're continuing to work on that from that transition document. And transition's always a discussion, especially this year, things like that 18 to 21 program. Supporting COVID-related issues, technical assistance availability, or TASN, all the different times that they continue to work with us. Graduation requirement task force, this is Trisha represents us on that as well. So I'm not really, she did a lot of discussion on this topic and I know I can't do it justice. But on the topics that she talked about, or anything that I missed that you really wanted to go into more detail on?
I think just letting the ICC know that our purpose and our mission is to represent students with disabilities and the families of those students. And so when we're addressing these topics, the Special Ed Advisory Council is just that. They are to advise the Special Education and Title Services team in those areas of interest to both families and to the state, as well as federal requirements. So when we have any type of report that's due, like our state performance plan annual performance report, which we submit annually, then Ciac provides us with input. For example, on our targets, we ask Ciac for their input, and through Ciac, then we approve the targets that we're setting for the next 5 years. So want the ICC members to understand that this relationship between the advisory council and the state is a critical one. It is required in federal statute that all states have an advisory council, and that's basically our formation. But one of the things that critically happened last year is having Jim Mckinney, a state board member on the Special Ed Advisory Council. When he heard our discussions, he said that we needed to be reporting this to the state board members on a more frequent basis. So we have an annual report that was provided this morning, and unfortunately my Outlook had crashed, so I could not join the group. So thank you, Jennifer, for the update on what occurred. I'm glad it went very well. But it's an issue now that we report to the state board quarterly. So we provide quarterly updates on our work and what we're addressing as an advisory council. I think the graduation requirement task force is a good example. Jim Mckinney was chair of that task force. And in our discussions, it was brought up that perhaps the Ciac members should be serving on the graduation task force. So we asked, and they said yes. So Trisha was placed on there. And Jim has repeatedly told me how valuable her input has been as a result of her serving, because that's a group that oftentimes gets overlooked, are students with disabilities. So we just want the ICC to be aware that as you work in an interagency collaborative manner, we also work in an interagency collaborative manner, as you could see from our membership, and that it's critical to the State Department that we do hear from the field. I mean, that transition document came about from a committee that Rocky Nichols and Jim Porter had formed and chaired and worked on. And as a result of some of the recommendations made for that task force, then we came up with the transition document, which was written in a manner that it's for parents and for students. And you can find that on the special education page on our KSDE.org website. So we want you to be sure to feel comfortable to go and examine any of the resources that you'll find on our Ciac page at KSDE.org. And I think that's what I'd like to share, Jennifer, is just for the ICC to feel welcome to explore our resources. And also, if any of you would like to attend a Ciac meeting as a public member, you're welcome to attend their open meetings. All you have to do is let Kayla know, and Kayla can send you the link so that you can participate.
Thank you, Bert. Kayla, can you turn to the next slide, please? So then just future items. We didn't have a lot to say about these other than just reading that some of our future items. And then it was just questions, and that was it. Do you guys have any questions on for Bert or myself or any of the rest of the team committee actually?
One of the things I might share, Jennifer, is that the legislative recommendation from Ciac was made to the state board. One was to provide an additional year for the 18 to 21 services due to the COVID pandemic and the lack of ability for students to receive community experiences and those work experiences that they would have normally received. So we have made that recommendation, and the state board is supporting that as one of their legislative platform issues. That would be a one-year opportunity for students that turn 21 to actually have another year through age 22. That's not in legislation now, but it is something that was recommended to the state board, and that the state board decided that they would move forward. The other thing that we brought up was the formation of some sort of teacher education plan at the high school level. We know that there are career technical education programs that support future teachers, but we want this to be a more dedicated issue to where we can get the brightest students to choose education and then to receive financial support in order to gain their bachelor's degree leading to licensure. So I just want y'all to be aware that we are trying to come up with some solutions for teacher licensure. And we also want to make sure that our students in the 18 to 21 program get what they deserve in that added service. I'm not going to call it compensatory education, but in all fairness to them, where they lack the ability to gain those experiences, then we want to make sure that they get that opportunity to get those experiences met before they move on to their post-secondary opportunities. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks. Any questions for us before we move on? Okay, we'll move on to our ex officio member reports then. And I'm not sure. Okay, so Leslie, do you have anything to report to us today?
Yes, thank you. Can I go ahead and share my screen? Is that okay?
Kayla will get it arranged.
Okay, great. Thank you. She's quick. Are you guys seeing my screen, the report? Okay, great. Well, first, I want to start out by saying that it's truly an honor for me to be able to represent the Parent Training Information Center and the families across Kansas. And I can't say how much I appreciate both the state ICC and Ciac for allowing us to have a seat at this table. So the knowledge that we gain, the resources, being able to stay on top of things, not just for me, but for all of our team, is really invaluable. So I do want to just publicly thank both of the councils for that. So going right into this report, this covers October through December. So I guess the second quarter of the fiscal year and the first quarter for our PTI grant, because we start off in October. And it's been a pretty busy time, as you can see. I kind of compared it to the last report, and it's not significantly different as far as, percentages go, and kind of the way, particularly like this pie chart, how it's split up. Most of the time our training and our parent assistance, which the tiers are these, can you guys see my cursor moving, I assume? Kind of using it as a pointer. Thanks, Bert. So those are, those tiers. And so, tier 1 parent assistance would be those families that, we are able to help them and answer their questions pretty quickly, or without, not a lot of technical, I guess, problem solving. But saying that, we joke a lot around here is that it's not easy anymore. There really aren't any easy questions anymore, or easy situations. But, so that kind of gives you a sense of when you get into that tier 3, where it, really is a lot more intense, and we're doing even more one-on-one work. And we're, in tier 2 is when we're kind of reviewing those IEPs and looking at, intervention plans, or talking to people about transitions, either from Part C to Part B, or, high school and up. But when you get into tier 3, you're really doing even more than that. You're sitting down with the family and maybe working with multiple systems, and also attending meetings with the families. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of the differences between those tiers. As far as, the breakdowns over here on the right, these are of the children. So this represents the ethnicities and the age group, of all of those parent assistants and those people that went to training. This is what, what that percentage breaks down as. And then, always give you this list of the different categories and how many calls we're getting. And I'll remind you guys that the numbers don't necessarily match up, because one parent might have 3 kids that we're helping with. So that's, that kind of a situation. I have noticed that we've had more parents of kids receiving gifted services these last couple of quarters. But interestingly, if you come down here and kind of look at the main content of contact, because we kind of tease that out a bit and really look at what is the real reason somebody called, actually calling about gifted services per se was only 3 that someone, so which means that that person who called that has a child receiving gifted services could have been calling, about, it could have been more about, their transition to adulthood, or, employment, or, just any of these topics. So this gives you a sense of that. And I will get this also sent to Kayla and Jordan, so that you guys all both have a hard copy of this. COVID numbers, it was interesting to me, because I kind of expected that to be higher just based on what I hear our team talking about. So I'm kind of interested to see, if we get more questions where somebody felt like they wanted to choose COVID-19 as one of the significant contents of the contact. Let's see what else. Like there was something, homeless, the homeless Mckinney Vento. I just want to again take the opportunity to say that Darla and I are really trying to spread the word that we are not hearing from schools or from DCF about kids that need an education advocate when they're homeless and unaccompanied. And so we know they're out there, but we're not seeing them represented within the education advocate program. So we're really trying to spread that word. I know that Darla last week, I think, sent an email to all of the homeless or the Mckinney Vento contacts in the school districts, kind of letting them know about this, and then just kind of encouraging them to make sure that if they think that a child might need an education advocate appointed to them, that they would reach out to us. And so lastly, these education advocate numbers, again, you can see how extremely busy that program is. So just to break it down for you a little bit, that October, that means that there were 74 appointments made. So that would be an official appointment made to an education advocate, between an education advocate and a student, and that 43 of those were brand new. So they weren't kids that had been moved, for instance, and that we were changing an education advocate, but this would be the first time that this appointment was being made. Cancellations, 60 of those were processed, and I always like to point out the 21, that means final. That means those kiddos were adopted or perhaps could have aged out of the system, but we really like it when we go through our adoption list and somebody is officially adopted and we no longer need to have that education advocate appointed. And then you have the total number processed. And then I also wanted to add, we talked on the state ICC about this recently, about making sure to let those folks know how many of those are early childhood appointments. So at age 3 is when the child would need to be officially appointed an education advocate if they did not have a parent available. And so that's what those early childhood appointments represents. And so that's 8 of those 267 were in that 3 to 5 range in October. So that's how to read that table. And then lastly, just encourage you to go to our website to see the different events that we have coming up. We are doing in person. Some, we've scheduled some in person that we've then changed to virtual. So I kind of say that we kind of really don't know until we get to the day or the day before. But the great thing is that is one silver lining, that we are able to quickly pivot, to change to virtual and not have to just cancel things. But yeah, check out our website. We actually are in the process of updating our website, so I'll make sure and tell you when that's finalized too. But we'd love to see you at events. And if you're not receiving our Monday memo that goes out every other Monday, that's something that, we'd love to have everybody on. Lots of great information is shared through that. And we also have a transition specific memo that goes out. And now with the new transition newsletter, I know Leah Holly has been part of helping with that. And then we have an early childhood and military Monday memo that goes out. Also, we'll just quickly tell you guys, in case anyone doesn't realize, that we do have a bilingual Spanish speaking staff. And so if you're working with families who need to talk to someone, in Spanish, then please know that that's available here too. Any questions from anyone? Thanks, Bert.
Thank you, Leslie. All right, so Ashley Ince, I believe is going. Do you have anything to share from Casey?
Yeah, just a quick update. If I could share my screen. Okay, everyone seeing that? The right screen, the one that actually says Casey? Okay. I've had a couple situations today where I pulled up the wrong screen entirely, so you guys don't need to see my calendar for this week. So I'm Ashley Enns, and I'm the liaison for our KC group. KC is our Kansas Association of Special Education Administrators. I know there were a few new people on the call or the meeting today, so I have just a few kind of overview things about KC, and then I'll get to some updates. So just as a reminder, we're in affiliation with CASE and CEC at the national level, and the USA at the national level, as well as partnering with those groups in Kansas so that we have some representation for special education administrators in those groups too. And then our mission and vision are listed on there as well. We had some changes in the officers since the last time that I was with the group. And so Doug Anderson is now president, and our president-elect is to be determined, but I believe that there was a nomination for that. So that should be new information that I can share with you guys, or that we can share with you at a later time. And then we have our secretary, treasurer, and of course, past president Heath Piney. It's good to see you, Heath. So quick updates for you guys. We do have a new executive director named Ann Matthews. I'll give you a little bit of her background in a moment. Our winter conference is also coming up. And we just this week started a new legislative session. And so I'll give you an update on some of the legislative topics we've been discussing. Ann Matthews has a wealth of information or a wealth of experience. She's been a special ed teacher, special education administrator. And so we're very pleased that she's coming on board to fulfill this part-time position. And I think that she'll bring a lot to the team to help kind of with our governance and making sure that we have these connections that we've been talking about throughout this meeting, helping to coordinate some of those connections too within KC. The winter conference is really focusing on not just building morale and helping staff and students in schools, but also taking care of ourselves, which I know starts to feel like we say that a lot, but kind of taking it from the angle of if we can help other people, it fills our bucket, it helps us, and then tying that in with our trauma-informed practices. So leaning on each other to make ourselves feel better, but also make others feel better, if that makes sense. So that is coming up here soon in February. And we have Monty Selby, who will be presenting on the classroom aspect of things, and then John Cannon, who will be talking about the trauma-informed practices. And we did make this, it is a hybrid, there's a hybrid option, and there's also an in-person option. And then finally, the legislative session just started back up this week and officially would be set to end May 25th. The legislative priorities for KC pretty much align with the other groups that I mentioned earlier, talking about school funding, school safety, capers and retirement, as well as the educational governance and keeping public funds in public education. And so the group every year for the last 2 to 3 years has been updating a document that outlines the costs of special education in Kansas. And I will say it's just complicated. Funding special education, there's a lot of moving parts with that. And so I think that this document helps to kind of outline where we are in special education funding in the state of Kansas and where we really would like to be so that we can be fully funded. I did put on that slide that KSDE estimates that special education is currently underfunded by about $140 million. And so what that happens with that is not that we don't serve students, it's that the districts then shoulder a lot more of the cost for special education services, and that puts a strain on the other systems that they have in the district. So, so the state is by statute intended to fund 92% of the costs that districts would incur when they're serving special educations or students with special education needs. And so when those fall short, that comes from the district's pocket, and the district has to find ways to provide that funding, which comes from other areas in the school district. So I did include a link there, and I'll send this on to Kayla, and I'll include the document there too, Kayla, so that you guys can review that. I think it does a nice job of outlining historically where we've been with special education funding in Kansas, and then also kind of helps to support where we'd like to go, because I think that we've got some good support for fully funding IDEA, and we want to move forward with that in our legislative session this year. So that is the update. Certainly, if you guys have any questions, I am happy to answer those. And I know we have some other KC representation on this call. So if there's any other details you guys would like to add, please feel free.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate you bringing all the good KC information to Ciac.
Absolutely, happy to. And I got 2 thumbs up from Bert. I'm going to take that and run with it, Bert. Thank you. I needed that this Wednesday.
All right, thank you. I think Mike is on the call today. Mike, do you have an update from Disability Rights Center? I think you're muted, Mike.
How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Sorry. When I plug into different monitor setups, it hijacks the HDMI, seems to hijack the different settings. So a couple of things, obviously, as others have talked about too, the legislative session has started. A couple of things that haven't been mentioned that I think are pertinent and will be of interest to Ciac are the Supported Decision-Making Bill, which is Supported Decision-Making Agreements Act, which is House Bill 2122. And we're currently still in the process of trying to move that forward. Definitely, if any of your groups have interest and would be willing to support efforts around that, we would definitely welcome that, whether that be testimony, whether that be just a letter, whether that be, contacts to your individual legislators. The good news is we do have a number of champions in the state house who are very interested in this issue, legislative champions, that is. And so I'm confident that we'll hopefully continue to move forward. One of the issues that we ran into last session that kind of sprung up out of nowhere, and just kind of a little summary, we modeled this bill after, I believe, Alaska, and there were several other states. I mean, this is the sort of, it's an issue that a number of states have either passed, or a number have passed. Several others are in the process of trying to pass something to basically create statutory recognition of supported decision-making agreements. And to clarify too, there are people, it's perfectly okay to use it informally. The best practice is, of course, a written agreement. And so that's what the bill creates. And I think, really, if we are able to get the bill through, the real work starts in educating people about supported decision-making, not just educators, but, attorneys in private practice, judges, and various other stakeholder groups as well, who are involved in setting up of guardianships. The issue we ran into last year, so the 3 years ago, we introduced the bill, it made it through the House, went to the Senate, they passed out a Senate committee and then died on general orders, just because of the committee that it was in, they had too many bills and not enough time. The Senate president said, you get 3 bills, and unfortunately we weren't one of the 3 at the end of the day of that. Then the next year was the COVID session that was cut short, so they didn't work it then. So last year we ended up having to reintroduce the bill. It sailed out of the House committee, and then some individuals from the trade associations of the financial services, the Bankers Association and Credit Union Association, even though we had talked to them in years past and had some conversations, for whatever reason, and in the bill, they're granted, if they are honoring a supported decision-making agreement, they have no liability. And if they deny, because they have knowledge that an agreement isn't valid, they deny helping somebody, giving them access to statements or something like that, they also have no liability. And that's expressly stated in the bill. But they had some concerns for their membership, which is one of their jobs. And needless to say, they have a little horsepower at the State House. And so they got our bill, or non-controversial bill, stalled a little bit. And so we're still in the process of trying to work with them to hopefully address any concerns that they have, which is hopefully mostly education, but to continue to move this forward. And so, yeah, that's House Bill 2122. Another bill that there's going to be both a House and Senate bill. And some of you may be aware, there are issues around guardians being able to open ABLE accounts under the Kansas ABLE program. And part of that has to do with some of the language. Part of that has to do with interpretation. You get a bunch of attorneys in a room and you end up with a lot of different interpretations. Anyways, and that's Kansas is part of a consortium with their program. So a lot of guardians have ended up having to go to other out of state. Another big change that's happened, even though the federal law passed several years ago, they finally finalized the regulations around it. And so this is a bill that I would characterize as mostly technical changes that will update our Kansas ABLE Act to make it work better for, and this is a bill that's being introduced. It had a lot of stakeholder involvement, but the Treasurer's Office, which administers the Kansas ABLE program, will be introducing the bill, and had, like I said, had worked extensively on it, including work with us and a number of other stakeholders on it. So we will keep tabs on that, but obviously that's an important tool for families through the lifespan to help individuals with disabilities to be able to cover disability related costs. So we will look on those two. Obviously, the budget will be a big deal. The details are just beginning to cover today. Obviously, last night was the state of the state. And so right now, everyone's just trying to dive into the budgets to figure out what got funded, what didn't, what levels. And so obviously we'll continue to monitor that. Another item of interest too is over the interim last year, they had 2 days, the legislature appointed an interim committee to study the IDD waiting list. And it was kind of relatively unprecedented to have that much time. And there were some really good members on that committee, including, committee leadership on both the House and Senate side of their appropriations and Ways and Means committees. And so it was really great to have that much testimony. Like any committee, as you listen to the discussion, they were making a lot of sausage. And I think you've heard me talk about that in the past. But they ended up with some really good recommendations at the end of that process. So obviously with anything, you don't dive into too much as a specific comment here or there. But again, those final recommendations were a great list of things to help kind of move things forward. Two that I want to kind of focus on. So with the IDD waiting list in particular, we know that most people, unless they have a crisis, are likely to be on that waiting list for right now 10 to 11 years. And who knows, it may even be longer than that if the status quo continues. And that's very unfortunate, creates all kinds of other problems, as I know you all are well aware of. And someone's needs change dramatically over a decade. And the state, they do an initial functional assessment when they are applying and get on the waiting list, and then nothing happens for years and years. And so the state really, other than, they know the name, the age, where the person lives, and really not a whole lot, depending upon how recently that functional assessment was done about those individuals. So the state is in the process of procuring, and there was a recommendation of this interim committee, but the state is also using the enhanced FMAP funds, is in the process of procuring a study that will likely take a couple of years before we really delve into all the details, but to do a pretty exhaustive study of all the waiting lists for the HCBS waivers. And so predominantly the IDD waiver, but there's also the PD waiver. And then we know too, on the autism waiver, there are individuals, they don't call it a waiting list, but they're individuals waiting to be served basically on that waiver as well. And so they're going to delve into that. One of the other key recommendations too, most of you may have heard a little bit of discussion around the mental health modernization committee that has been meeting over the last couple of years that the legislature created, that had both legislative members of the committee, and then they split up into subcommittees that had stakeholder engagement as well, and did a lot of work. That I think has largely been a very successful process. This committee, this interim committee, one of their recommendations was to ask the LCC, the Legislative Coordinating Council, to appoint an IDD modernization task force that could be similar to that mental health modernization. And that would be amazing if we can get to that process. And I think there's a lot of folks in the community, as well as legislators, that are really excited about the prospects of that process. And so, yeah, I think when you take those two things, the waiting list study, which would hopefully inform the work of this task force, we have the potential of making more progress on the IDD waiting list than we have ever. And like many things, I mean, the issue, money is a very important issue, but it's not, even if we had, through $500 million at this, that wouldn't create the capacity necessarily, you still be short the capacity to serve those individuals and make sure that we understand what they need. So a lot of transition youth potentially on the waiting list may not need all the services in the comprehensive waiver, and may need different services that aren't even on the waiver, such as transportation would be one. And so we're hoping through this process to reshape some of the waiver. There was some discussion too, one of the recommendations to look at either a comprehensive children's waiver or looking at a community supports waiver. And so the comprehensive children's waiver would be in addition to the current IDD waiver, and would probably have services tailored a little different. KDAD's talked about that during this 2-day committee meeting. I think a lot of details a lot would have to happen, to take that from proposal to get it across the finish line if that were to happen. But anyways, so lots of exciting things there. And then we've also, I was appointed and served on the autism task team, which was they brought together a broad group, a relatively small group, but broad group to make recommendations to KDADs on, not just the autism waiver, but looking at how we can best serve individuals on the spectrum. And really interesting. That's one of those opportunities where I go on the meetings to learn, because there's some really smart people with great experience on there. And so that group is in the process. A lot of the recommendations are actually largely similar to what the IDD modernization team came with, but with a lot more autism specific pieces. And but it's, I think, kind of an exciting time to, where we're hopefully going to have some good recommendations from a funding situation with some of the federal funding that comes through. It's one-time money, but I think it will hopefully create some opportunity to make some good investments, key investments that will help, give us a good position to make, significant changes going forward to better serve, all those communities. And so those are a lot of different things, but as you can tell, there's a lot of exciting things happening, and happy to be a part of it and to share these with the Ciac as well.
All right, thank you, Mike. Cindy, have any questions for Mike before we move on?
All right, thanks everyone.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I think he was just waving at you, but thank you. So next we have the state board updates. And since Jim is not here, do we have someone who's providing any of those, Bert?
I think he'll provide that tomorrow. He's still in meeting today and they're out today, so he'll be with us tomorrow. So sorry, SICC. We can't give you that. We'll get it from him tomorrow. And then stay tuned. You can join us tomorrow if you want to. So.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for coming today, and for everybody who presented. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
This is Tobias. I'll move to adjourn.
Marvin, I'll second that.
This is one I always forget, I guess, but we have to vote on that. So.
Does Kayla have a poll? Aha. I think while that's tabulating, Jennifer, a reminder that we start at 9 in the morning for you Ciac members.
Thank you for that.
I'm sure this will be a close vote.
Hey, Jennifer or Bert, I got a real quick question. Are we doing a presentation to the state board tomorrow?
No.
Okay, we are not. So different than last year. Okay.
Well, it's different because we're virtual and they didn't want anyone in the boardroom other than those presenting. So we didn't get to parade this year, but we'll get that opportunity next year, we hope.
I think it was the same last year though, because I remember Heath presenting, and so I just went in there when Heath was presenting, and so I think it was the same this year as it was last year.
But Marvin, you're right. Normally we would have the entire Ciac, but we also would have fed them breakfast.
Right. I thought I couldn't remember if Heath went in person or if he was the only one that went on the Zoom meeting we watched on YouTube or something. But
yeah, that is right. That's right. That
I was in
that was
person
the difference that you
and
guys
Heath
watched.
was online. So.
Yeah, that was the difference.
You're exactly right. That's how it was.
Feels like 3 years ago already, though.
I'm sure they missed you this year, Heath, when they had to listen to me talk, although they would have enjoyed Trisha's part. But all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Motion has passed to adjourn. So we'll see you tomorrow.
And thank you, ICC. Really appreciated this opportunity to hear from you.